okay, to talk
the questions that you had.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
we have time.
Okay, so we're going to start pretty soon with the chanting the Namo Tassa.
Okay, before you start, I'm going to mute, you have to unmute yourself, okay? Just
unmute myself.
Yes, unmute. Just the command will come, okay? Unmute yourself.
Oh.
Okay.
You can all hear me, right?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and chant the Namo Tassa and the three refuges. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this continuing Sutta study class. And this week, we'll be going to continue our discussing or going over the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, last week we went over the 5 hindrances because I wanted people to have that all that different information, because it's the 5 hindrances that make it difficult for us to practice, the Satipatthana or basically any other kind of meditation. But the previous week, 2 weeks ago, I had started with the Kayagata Sati Sutta, or mindfulness of the body sutta. And that is basically almost the same, identical, with the first part of the Satipatthana Sutta, or the Foundations of Mindfulness. Now, I'm going to also be using some shared screen to put parts of this sutta up. So I'm going to be going back and forth from showing the shared screen, some text on the shared screen, and then so my little photo would probably be smaller to one side, but then I'll go back as I'm doing some commentary to that. I'll go back to the full screen and kind of be going back and forth between the shared screen and then my, seeing me talking. Okay, so hope you don't get too confused, but I'm going to be sort of managing that. So I'm going to put up the shared screen for a moment. So that's the link to the sutta that you had posted up last time on the website. And so the Buddha gave this discourse to the monks in a place called Dhamma. And in the second in this paragraph here, he starts out, "This is the only way, monks, for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the destruction of suffering and grief, for entering the right path, for the attainment of Nibbana, namely the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. Now, the term, this is the only way, in Pali, it was the Ekayano Magga, and it's been translated by other translators as the direct way also. It's a technical word, Ekayano Maggo, means one and path. But I like the way of, because when you say the only way or the sole way, it sounds a little bit kind of like dogmatic. And so people, from other traditions might hear that and said, oh, this is, that means it's the only way, and, no one can attain anything, enlightenment by any other means. So I like the translation of direct path. And it still has the meaning from the Ekayano Maggo, the direct path. That means, or this method leads to only one result. So there's a lot of meditations that we say kind of beat around the bush, like let's say just practicing concentration for, a long period of time, and then, before going on to develop any insight. And the people might go on years and years hoping to attain jhana and never do it, and oftentimes don't really actually get on to, or they get stuck in the bliss and peace and quiet of, practicing just the one-pointed concentration, and don't go on to practicing insight, as I've mentioned before. So, so this path is the direct way. It means it attacks the problem of ignorance directly, by going directly into the body and to the mind, rather than, doing other practices first. And it doesn't mean the other practices are not beneficial, but just to say that, to show that this is the direct way. That practicing the Four Foundations only leads to one result, and that result is the destruction of the defilements, as you see there, for the destruction of suffering, or entering the right path. That means attaining the Satipatthana stage, and for then attainment of Nibbana, going through the other four stages. And so he goes over the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, contemplating the body and in the body, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having overcome in this world covetousness and grief. And he says the same thing for feelings in the feelings, the mind states in the mind states, in contemplating mental objects in mental objects. Ardent. Ardent means fully focused, with a lot of, energy. Clearly comprehending. That means understanding what he is investigating and observing. And then, more importantly, overcoming in this world covetousness and grief for the body, feelings, mind states, and Dhamma. And then the next section is the contemplation of the body. Now, I've gone over that before in the Kayagata Sati Sutta, so I'm not going to go over that again now. And you can read it over again if you like. But basically, it means practicing the breathing awareness to gain that initial concentration. It doesn't necessarily mean going through all the jhanas. It means gaining that tranquility of mind, calming the breathing down, and calming, tranquilizing the body and mind functions in at least that state of, let's say, momentary concentration that I was discussing last week, or have previously talked about those three levels of what are called concentration, momentary concentration, access concentration, and jhanic level concentration. And so he lives contemplating the origination and dissolution factors in the body, or the mindfulness is established with the thought the body exists to the extent necessary just for knowledge and mindfulness. And he lives detached and clings to nothing in the world. That means clinging with, desire or aversion, knowing how everything is impermanent. And basically that also means clinging to the 5 aggregates. So this is how a monk lives, contemplating the body in the body. But I want to go over this mindfulness with clear comprehension. So after getting centered in the body with the breathing, then he has you observe the 4 postures. So that's getting the mind more grounded and rooted sort of in the body, kind of, opening up from just observing the breathing, but then going into the postures. So feeling the sitting posture, the standing, walking posture. But the next part, the mindfulness with clear comprehension. Now this clear comprehension, according to the commentaries, has 4 parts. So this is connected with the bodily movements. So whatever you're going to do with the body, that clear comprehension of what you're about to do should be there. So it's not just the mindfulness self, but and the first of the 4 clear comprehensions is the purpose, knowing what is the purpose of my doing this now, in going forward, in going back, and bending, stretching, going here or there. What is the purpose of it? And to see if this purpose is suitable. So the second one is the suitability. Is it going to be suitable, keeping with my meditation practice, to do this particular thing? Let's say if it was to maybe break some precept or do some unskillful action, or do something with excessive greed or aversion. You should you have to ask, is this suitable for my meditation practice? Is this going to help me in calming the mind or making the mind more agitated, for decreasing the hindrances or increasing the hindrances? So that if you see that it's not going to be suitable, you abandon that action and you do the right action. And the third of the clear comprehensions is keeping within the domain, is what I'm doing, helping to keep my mind in the domain. Means the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That's the meditator's domain or pasture. How cows are out in a pasture and they are munching on the grass out in the pasture. Well, the Buddha said that these 4 foundations of mindfulness are the pasture for a monk, or a pasture for the meditating. Keep within your pasture. Eat the grass of the 4. Get your sustenance from the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that's the domain. If you see your mind going outside of that domain of mindfulness, then to bring it back into that domain. So it's understanding in that. So understanding the purpose of what one is doing, and is that purpose going to be suitable for my deepening my meditation practice, or is it going to cause unnecessary extra guilt, worry, fear, remorse, greed, or aversion? So these are always the criterion that one should try to apply when you're about to do anything with the body. And then the 4th of the clear comprehensions is the comprehension of non-delusion. So this refers to understanding that whatever this body is doing, and even the mind too, but whatever this body is doing, it's doing it without any owner or controller. That means every time you do something, there's a cause for doing that. And usually the cause is having to obey the laws of the laws of nature. If you have to get up to go to the bathroom, okay, this is a legitimate reason for going over to let's say the bathroom, or to go to the kitchen, so for the requisites. So we have to have the requisites of clothing, food, the medicine, and also the shelter and so on. So using those things, it's suitable if you're using them without greed and so on, wanting to have too much luxury, or being different, the things like that. So anyway, the comprehension of non-delusion, knowing that whatever this body is doing is just doing it out of habits. And anything that you do is conditioned from the past karma. So that helps you to then have the detachment. And so, this body is there, it does this and that thing, but just for the purpose of developing knowledge and understanding, and not for creating more attachments or aversions, or creating other problems in your life by, getting addicted to things, or getting too much conditioned in our strong habits. So anyway, and I've already talked about these other types of contemplation of the body, so I'm not going to go over that now, and we're going to go on to the contemplation of feelings. So you can read that. How does a monk live contemplating feelings and feelings? When experiencing a pleasant feeling, he knows experiencing a pleasant feeling. And the same with the painful feeling, and the neither pleasant nor painful feeling. And then it goes on to say, I experience a pleasant worldly feeling. Now he's introducing something different. He's bringing a distinction. There's pleasant worldly feelings, and there's pleasant unworldly feelings. So I'm experiencing, he knows if he's experiencing a pleasant unworldly feeling, or a painful unworldly feeling. So there's 6 kinds of feelings here. There's a pleasant worldly feeling, painful worldly feeling, and a neither painful nor pleasant worldly feeling. Worldly means it's connected with the 6 senses and connected with the desire. But basically it's the objects of our senses. Like you get a pleasant feeling from eating food, hearing music, smelling certain things, tasting, touching, and thinking, or you get the painful feelings from those. Now, what is the unworldly pleasant feeling? This refers to the pleasant sensations like piti and sukha that come in the attainment of jhanas, or also come from insight. So that the happiness that comes from developing meditation practice. So it's not connected with greed and attachment for the external world. These are pleasant sensations that are coming from within the mind itself, from knowing that they're getting closer to deeper, kind of spiritual experiences. Especially the pleasure and the happiness that comes when the mind is when the mind is secluded. So remember when we went over the jhanas, it said, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, he enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is, born of seclusion. So that means from the impingement of the sense objects. So the happiness that comes out of meditation is not coming from those type of sensory experience. So, but what is a unworldly, painful feeling? This is interesting. So we talked about unworldly, pleasant feeling is a piti and sukha you get from, either practicing concentration or, practicing insight and gaining those deeper levels of insight that we'll also talk about later. But what is a unworldly, pleasant or unworldly, painful feeling? So the commentaries explain that as, let's say you've been practicing meditation for a long time. And this was especially kind of directed toward monks, monks, people who became monks and they were practicing for a long time and having to obey all the Vinaya rules and other restrictions and, hoping to get some, quickly get some deep happiness out of meditation. But they couldn't get it so quickly. So they get disappointed if they're practicing for a long time and, but they're not making as quick a practice as quick results or progress as they thought, then they become, disappointed. And that's called a unworldly, painful feeling because it's connected with, not gaining it's a pain of not getting, this deeper level of non-worldly happiness. And the neither pleasant nor painful worldly feeling is basically the kind of feeling like you hear sounds going on in the background, but the mind doesn't react to them in any way. It kind of just ignoring them in the background, and it's not or from any other senses. It's just kind of ignoring a lot of the weaker stimulations that are coming through the mind. But what's a neither pleasant nor painful unworldly feeling? This is explained as being the equanimity. So we know equanimity is also a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, but it's a deeper level of experience that comes again with the jhanas, or the insight, the equanimity that comes with the third and fourth jhana, or the equanimity that comes with that last stage of insight knowledge that I talked about last week, the level of equanimity of formations. So that's a neither pleasant nor painful spiritual feeling. As opposed to the neither pleasant nor painful unworldly pleasant feeling, which is the happiness, piti and sukha of the, gaining in the meditation practice. So thus he lives contemplating feelings and feelings internally or externally, or both internally and externally. Okay, I'm going to just stop the share screen here for a moment. And so he understands when these feelings arise, he understands what they are, and he understands how they arise and how they cease. So we did this also in the, actually I'm going to go back to the share screen for a moment again. So he lives contemplating the feelings and the feelings internally. Internally means contemplating them in yourself. And then contemplating them externally means when you see somebody else having these kind of feelings, like when you see a person having being happy and smiling, then you can assume, it's kind of assuming from a person's behavior that, oh, this person is having a pleasant worldly feeling. If like he eats some food, he gets a smile, and oh, such a nice taste. Okay, that's a worldly pleasant feeling. Or if he's having some disgust and you see his face grimacing because they've been sitting too long in the meditation, you can assume, this person is having a painful worldly feeling that's in his body. So the contemplating externally means observing these things in the external world or in somebody else, but it assumes a kind of implied inference. You're inferring that. You don't actually experiencing that directly, but by observing, you know how yourself react to pleasant and painful feelings. So when other people are reacting that way, we can assume that in that moment they're having these kind of feelings. And they live contemplating the origination factors in feelings. What are the origin factors in feelings? And the dissolution factors in feelings. So you how did this pleasant feeling arise? Again, this is part of clear comprehension. How did it arise? Because of contact. Because the sound of birds chirping in the morning, for example, comes to the ear, you might get a pleasant feeling, a pleasant worldly feeling. How did it arise? Because of contact and because of the past conditioning too. If the contact is not there, you're not going to hear it at that moment. So the origination factors, and because it's not you that's doing it, it's this conditioning. Again, it's important to understand. It's all directed at seeing the non-self nature of how our mind operates. So the feelings arise because of contact, and the desire or aversion based on them is also based on the past conditioning, where you see that as a painful or pleasant feeling. And then the dissolution factors. What are the dissolution factors in feelings? Well, if you attain the state of nirodha samapatti, or the cessation of feeling and perception, or the formless jhanas, then those feelings may cease because the sense organs are cut off at that time, or when you die, or when you go to sleep, when the consciousness requires those triple conjunction of the sense organ working, the sense object, and the consciousness attraction to that object, then that's contact. Dependent on contact, feeling arises. So this is how we have to, this is part of the Chintamaya Panya that we've talked about quite a lot, that second level of understanding. This Satipatthana Sutta, this section of it, is cultivating that Chintamaya Panya, or the deeper understanding that comes through reflection. And this same kind of paragraph is repeated, over and over again for also the other mind states and all the other feelings. The origination factors in a painful worldly feeling, or a painful unworldly feeling, or the origination factors in a pleasant unworldly feeling. So the mind becomes very clear on the types of feelings that are arising, that again help to give a more complete understanding of our mind, because all of our succeeding thoughts, mind states arise out of these, the feelings that are arising. There's six kind of feelings. But until one has attained the jhana levels, and most of the feelings will be the first level, just the worldly pleasurable feeling, the worldly painful feeling, and the worldly neither painful nor pleasant feeling. But only when you start experiencing the piti and the sukha and the happiness that's coming from insights and coming out of the meditation itself, then those you could consider then to be the pleasant, unworldly feelings. And how did they arise? Because you've been practicing meditation. For most people, they don't just come out of the blue, right? But maybe you've been struggling with meditation for a long time, then finally you experience that piti and sukha, and you'd be very happy. So that's an unworldly, pleasant feeling, because it is not connected to the gross world of sensory objects and desire. So that is how a monk lives, contemplating feelings and feelings. Or having gone through that, this paragraph, it says, or his mindfulness is established with the thought, feelings exist to the extent necessary just for knowledge and mindfulness. This is important also. That means you become detached from the feeling, and you're no longer attached even to the pleasant feelings that are arising, whether the pleasant worldly feeling, pleasant unworldly feeling, because you understand the origination factors and how they can also dissolve. They only last a short time and they change and they dissolve. Even the unworldly, pleasant and painful feelings too. So you understand their impermanence. So you have that onlooking awareness that's established, okay, these feelings exist. So what? Just, don't get attached to them. Just let them come and go. You can enjoy it while it's there, but not to cling to it, because we can't cling to it. There's no one that owns or controls it. And we just create the conditions where these feelings may arise more and more. And so the person lives detached and clings to nothing in the world in regarding the feelings, but in the larger world as well. So that's how one contemplates the feelings. And then we go on to the contemplation of mind states or consciousness, the chittanupassana. So sometimes they call it the contemplation of consciousness, but consciousness is a mental state, although consciousness itself is just sort of like the clear light, but the contents of the consciousness. So how does a monk live contemplating consciousness and consciousness? You're in the person knows the consciousness with lust, or without lust, or the mind with hate or without hate, or with ignorance or without ignorance. And then he goes on to list these other states. He's aware of a shrunken state of consciousness. A shrunken state means a state that's, mostly either with sloth and torpor. It's shrunken. That means it's shrunken its field of awareness and brightness, and it's just absorbed in self-pity or absorbed in some types of thoughts. So it's shrunk into itself. That's a shrunken state of consciousness. Or a distracted state. The mind is easily distracted, like with restlessness and worry. So you simply note it. The mind is distracted now. And how does this distraction arise? And how does it continue? And how does it cease? And it arises because we have hindrances. And how does it cease? When we overcome the hindrances. And the path leading, how do we develop that? Developing the Eightfold Path. And so he even goes on to say, to recognize the mind, if you're concentrated, recognize, the mind is concentrated now. Or if it's not concentrated, the mind is not concentrated now. If you experience a freed state of consciousness, like being in one of the jhanas or experiencing the magga and phala, then you understand, the mind is experiencing a free state now, or the unfreed state. The mind is still caught up in its hindrances. So it's just recognizing that these mind states also, how do they arise? Next paragraph, he contemplates them internally in himself. Externally, he assumes when he sees others, or both. And he understands their origination factors in consciousness or mental states. And again, that's because of contact. And it's because of having been born, we have this consciousness. And when we have the triple conjunction there, we have consciousness arising. So it assumes that you understand something about the paticca samuppada to understand these origination factors and feelings and mind states, and the dissolution factors in feeling and mind states. It is already assumes that you have a good understanding, a good understanding of the intellectual Dhamma, and reflecting on these. That's why, that intellectual wisdom that we've talked many times about before, being the first step of the Eightfold Path, to have that. Otherwise, you're not able to understand. You don't know how these things arise or cease, or how to keep them from arising in the future. So that's usually most meditators skip these parts. They skip this part of the contemplation, and they just want to, get into some state of awareness. But without this is important for things that we'll realize later on, or what I talked about in the insight knowledge this last week about developing the seeing the dissolution, then seeing the terror and the danger, and the desire for deliverance, the dispassion desire for deliverance. That's what most people don't go on to develop these stages, because they just get caught up in the superficial aspects of the getting attached to the superficial aspects of insight, or that's enough for them, and they don't want to go too deep, because they're afraid they might have to give something up or something like that. But whatever. Anyway, this is what again, you have to realize, why is the Buddha telling this? Because this is the direct path to the overcoming of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And then we'll talk about that if one practices, you could even gain that full enlightenment even in one lifetime. But most people go on beating around the bush, so they take many, many lifetimes to develop that. Okay, so, and then or else. It doesn't mean you have to do all these things, but he keeps on saying, or else, or he contemplates internally and externally, or else. It means you don't have to go on doing that all the time. If you've already developed the previous ones, you go directly to this, or else. Consciousness exists just to the extent necessary for knowledge and mindfulness. And the person lives detached, clinging to nothing in the world. This is how the monk lives, contemplating consciousness and consciousness. Again, with the non-delusion, that it's not my consciousness, it's just consciousness that's conditioned and has arisen because of birth, has come from a previous life, has arisen again in this life. When you get the mind and body, then consciousness starts functioning again. And then it goes on through the whole life, until death. That consciousness is reborn again into another life, not the same consciousness, of course, but the continuity of it. But it's not, doesn't have any owner or controller to it. That's what's important to understand. Okay, now, then he goes on to this contemplation of the mental objects. And I'm not gonna, basically this refers to the first section is the 5 aggregates. So we went over before. So the person understands, sensual desire has arisen in me, or sensual desire is not in me. It's kind of similar to the mind states that we just went over. So a lot of these are very much overlapping. So especially the mental objects, there's 5 categories of the mental objects. And this 5 hindrances is the first one, because we've got to overcome the 5 hindrances to a certain extent before we can skillfully and more successfully contemplate the following categories of mental objects. So again, this repeats a lot of what we've already talked about. Just understanding when the sense desire has arisen, acknowledging that. How does this sense desire arise? By your feeding them, as we've already mentioned. How do they cease? By not feeding them further, and by making the corrective actions, applying the right efforts to help overcome sloth and torpor, overcome guilt, worry, remorse, and fear, overcome, the sense desire, ill will, and so on. So, so understanding the origination factors in the 5 hindrances, understanding the dissolution factors in the 5 hindrances, and how these things will cease to arise in the future, again, by doing the practice. So you contemplate this over and over. And then finally, to just acknowledging, okay, these 5 hindrances exist, but for the purpose of gaining knowledge and mindfulness, and and gaining the motivation to overcome them. So that's the main, not be sad about it, by getting motivated to want to do the correct practice that will help weaken those hindrances. So I'm going to just go back again. So again, he knows how the arising of, well, this is interesting, for each of the 5 hindrances, he knows there is a sense desire in me, or he knows no sense desire in me. He knows how the arising of the non-arisen sense desire comes to be, and he knows how the abandoning of the arisen sense desire comes to be. And he knows how the non-arising in the future of the abandoned sense desire comes to be. Again, I just previously sort of explained that. He knows how it arises because you've cultivated the habits before. He knows how they're abandoned by applying the right effort, applying the opposite antidotes, and how they get abandoned in the future by attaining the stages of enlightenment. And the same way with when the anger is arisen, sloth and torpor, agitation, doubt. How does a doubt arisen? We've already talked about that in that booklet that we went over last week, by unwise attention to various things. So, I suggest you go back, and all these things dovetail together. You do these different works, and so you have to know how all these fit together to get a comprehensive understanding. And so he contemplates his mental objects internally in oneself, or contemplates them externally. If you see somebody else has got these hindrances, if they're sleeping in meditation, their chin's on their chest and they're nodding out, you can say, this person has sloth and torpor. It's not rocket science, right? You can assume that person has sloth and torpor now. Or if the person is getting angry, and you can assume that person, hindrance of anger is arising in this person. And then they exist only for that, to the extent necessary for knowledge and mindfulness, living detached. So the second of the 5 aggregates, I'm sorry, the second category of the contemplation of mental objects is the 5 aggregates. So we've already talked quite a bit about the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So it's the same thing. These same paragraphs are repeated over and over again for each of these categories. This is material form, the arising of material form. That means if you hear a sound, The sound is the material form. Then the feeling arises because of the material form. The feeling arises because of the feeling. The perception arises because of the perception. The volitional formations arise. And because of that, the consciousness is there experiencing it and becomes a certain type of mental state or state of consciousness. So that's how we have to apply that understanding. This is how they arise. And he understands how they arise, the five aggregates. He understands how they're dissolve. Ultimately, it's only with the stage of full enlightenment, by terminating samsara, that the five aggregates cease to arise in the future. That only pertains to the state of, gaining full enlightenment and transcending the wheel of birth and death. But even within our meditation, we can understand how the intensity and the attachment of the aggregates come and go. So that's why it's good in meditation to be able to identify when the material form, this is material form. It's one of the four elements of, the vibration of solidity, fluidity, heat, and motion. Or sound, visible object, visible vibration, smell vibration, heat vibration, odor vibration. That's the form, but the feeling arises on dependence upon that and the craving. So again, you have to apply the paticca samuppada as you go through, all of those five aggregates. Again, seeing how they are not knowing that these five aggregates exist just for the knowledge and mindfulness and the living detached, not clinging to those aggregates, because they represent the whole world, really, the conditioned world. And that's how the monk lives contemplating mental objects and mental objects, the five aggregates of clinging. And then the third category is the six internal and external sense bases. And so this is, he understands, he knows the eye and visible forms and the fetter that arises dependent on both. So again, with contact, the eye and visible forms arise, or you have the eye on the body, and with contact, the visual form arises, and then the feeling and the perception that we get attached to. So that's the fetter that arises dependent on the contact and feeling. The fetter means the attachment, the fetter of sense desire, the fetter of ill will, the fetter of anyway, we're going to talk about the fetters in the Dhamma talk on Sunday. I'm going to start going over the 10 fetters and how they're connected to the hindrances. But basically, you can just see the fetters as similar to the hindrances right now. So it's very similar, but it's to understand the fetter that arises because of the contact between eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and their corresponding objects. How the fetters come to arise, especially the sense desire and ill will, or pride and conceit, and so on. And so the same is applied for all the other senses, the ear and sounds, nose and smells. He knows how he knows the arising, how the fetter arises. He knows how the arising of the non-arisen fetter comes to be. He knows how the abandoning of the arisen fetter comes to be. And he knows how the non-arising in the future of the abandoned fetter comes to be. Again, that's only with the attainment of the one of the four stages of enlightenment that those fetters are connected to. Again, that I'll be mentioning later in the next talks. Thus, he lives contemplating mental objects and mental objects, in the sense bases, contemplating again internally, externally, contemplating the origination factors, dissolution factors. So, so much of this is repeated, but it's repeated with each of them, as I'll be mentioning shortly, because it's a gradual stage of development. And so up to this point, you're developing mindfulness of the body. You're also developing mindfulness and concentration to a certain level. Then having gotten centered in the body, detached from the body, then you're contemplating the feelings that are arising in this body. If you're not detached from the body, you won't be able to detach from the feelings that are arising, because you're clinging to that pain in your knee. And so you're identifying with the body. So already you're defeated, you're hooked. So that's why it's the mindfulness of the body is to get detachment from the body, seeing it as just the body. So when the feeling arises in the body, like a pain in some part of the body, you can more easily get detachment from the pain because you're already detached from the body. And then you have to, because the body is the reason why it produces the mental pain, because you're clinging to this body as being mine. The mind is clinging, this body is me, it's mine. And so you've got to do the homework. You've got to, all this is a preparation, each of the previous states. That's why it's important not to skip around. People want to skip around. Oh, mindfulness of the body, that's for babies. That's to beginning. Give me, mindfulness of the enlightenment factors. They want to immediately start. No way, not going to happen. Sorry. So that's why, the Buddha mentioned all these things, the very specific reasons why he taught these different types of meditation from A to Z, because each one is a stepping stone to the next one, to prepare the mind. And in each one of these levels, you're developing the mindfulness and concentration until you get to this fourth one, the 7 factors of enlightenment. And so this is where I'm going to talk more about 7 factors of enlightenment, especially how they differ from the ordinary factors. So what are the factors of enlightenment? They're mindfulness, investigation of Dhamma, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So those can be ordinary factors when a person has not yet reached the level of a Satipatthana. Only when they've reached the level of a Satipatthana, then they have the power, the factor of enlightenment, or at least when they've gained a deep, maybe not necessarily you have to attain the stage of the first stage of enlightenment or more, but at least to have the strength of concentration, of jhanic level concentration. And I'll talk more about that next week when I'm talking about the Anapanasati Sutta, because that's where it's mentioned. It gives the criterion for what makes it an enlightenment factor as opposed to just an ordinary factor. I'm not going to go into that now, but but the import is that in order to go on to this fourth category, you won't be able to unless you already have developed the previous 4, the foundations of mindfulness, body, feelings, mental states, overcome the hindrances, being able to identify the aggregates and the senses, gaining detachment from those. Only then does all of that accumulated give these, the mindfulness that you're experiencing, then give it that factor of enlightenment. So that's why you can't really go on to these next ones without having developed the mind to a certain extent in those previous once. So again, he's aware when the enlightenment factor is present or not present. He knows how the arising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor comes to be, and how the perfection and the development of the arisen enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be, and the same with all the other 7 factors of enlightenment. So you can read through those and but each of those is a factor that has to come first. You have to have an enlightenment factor of mindfulness to be able to have the enlightenment factor of the investigation. And you don't get the investigation leads to the enlightenment factor of energy, that aroused energy. And then the energy gives the joy. And again, that's because the mind by that time has reached that level of jhanic level concentration. And therefore the piti and the sukha is arising with that investigation. Anyway, he's gotten that what's come, the joy of the insight. Even if it's not the jhanic level, it's still the joy of insight that arises too. So, and this, the contemplation, the enlightenment factor of concentration, that refers to the enlightenment factor of, at least the 3rd or 4th jhana, because that's where equanimity arises, only in the 3rd and 4th jhana. But you see, you're gaining deeper and deeper levels of concentration, weakening the hindrances and attaining these levels of jhana while practicing the mindfulness. It's not something you do before practicing mindfulness. You're gaining it by being mindful of the hindrances, letting go of them, applying the right antidotes, eliminating them. And that's the concentration. You have to be concentrated to do that. And only when those hindrances have been overcome to a great degree, then you reach that jhanic level. I'm not going to call it jhana itself, but we call it jhana level of concentration, which comes through the mindfulness practice. Sometimes it's called the supramundane jhana, because it's connected with the level of a Sotapanna's wisdom. We'll talk more about later too. So that's why you can really only contemplate those last mental objects really after you've reached the level of a Sotapanna. I mean, effectively, because of the accumulation of the weakening of the defilements and so on. And then the last of the mental objects is the granddaddy of them all, contemplating the 4 noble truths. And so the monk knows, according to reality, this is suffering, the origination of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the road leading to the cessation of suffering. So you can only be a Sotapanna to understand that. That's why, because you only understand the 4 noble truths. You only really understand what suffering is when you get a glimpse of non-duality, when you have temporarily seen through the illusion of ego and experienced that state of liberation. And then you also understand the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, because you've been doing it for so many months or years or lifetimes of your meditation spiritual practice. So anyway, so these contemplations are really, referring to that level of the Magga and Phala, because you've developed those factors of enlightenment to that level. Okay, now, having gone through that, I want to just go on to what the Buddha called his guarantee, or Bhante Gunaratana, he fondly calls this the Buddha's guarantee. He says, verily, monks, whoever practices these four foundations of mindfulness in this way, that means completely, not just one or two of them, all completely, for 7 years, if you were to practice them for 7 years, that means uninterrupted, then one of the two fruits may be expected. Highest knowledge of arhatship, or if some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-returning. And then some monks probably said, wow, 7 years, come on, I can't wait that long, give me a break. So the Buddha says, let alone 7 years, if you can practice them for 6 years, and each time he keeps on lessening it, monks keep on saying, well, I don't have 6 years, come on. It's okay, 5. And he said, okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let alone a year, should any person practice these four foundations of mindfulness in this manner for 7 months, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, a month, a half a month, then one of the two fruits may be expected by him. Highest knowledge here and now, or of some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-return. Then monks said, come on, I don't even have 2 weeks. Give me a break. Come on, maybe I got cancer. I'm going to pass away in a week. So then the Buddha said, okay, let alone a week. If any person practices these four foundations of mindfulness in this manner for 1 week, then one of these two fruits may be expected. The highest enlightenment, or if some clinging is yet present, that means some of the subtle fetters, the state of non-returning. Because of this, it was said, this is the direct way, monks, for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the destruction of suffering and grief, for the reaching the right path, the attainment of nibbana, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. Thus spoke the Blessed One, satisfied, the monks approved of his words. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends, so that is the sutta, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit more as we go on too. How it's integrated into the practices of meditation. But again, I highly recommend if you can reread this sutta, and especially understanding the origination factors, the dissolution factors, and how the arising of all these various defilements and so on are overcome in the future. That's an important aspect for developing the to getting the fruits and the highest states of purification. Okay, so having gone through that, let's see if there's any questions have arisen. Any if we've got any chat questions or. This one question, please explain the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. I've already been explaining that so many times in different ways. Or go back and listen to the talks. It's about starting with mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of body, feelings, mind states. That's the way you develop mindfulness. That's the way you develop the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, is by developing these preliminary you're developing it as you go along, but it only reaches the enlightenment factor of mindfulness when you've reached some level of concentration, where the hindrances have subsided. And it's that deep level of concentration that makes that mindfulness penetrate, makes it very keen and lucid and sharp. Without that concentration, you won't get it. It just becomes mediocre mindfulness. It's still all right, but it's not an enlightenment factor. That's the difference. So But anyway, I may talk about this next week when I go over the Anapanasati Sutta. So next week, the sutta I'm going to go over is the Anapanasati Sutta. And that will cover the trilogy of the three main suttas that the Buddha taught about the meditation. Mindfulness of the Body Sutta, Mindfulness, Four Foundations of Mindfulness, and Anapanasati Sutta. And they're all very much connected. Okay. Can you please talk about Kanika Samadhi in respect to the Satipatthana? I talked about Kanika Samadhi in last week's talk. That's why we recorded these talks. I suggest going back and listening to that talk. It means momentary concentration. It means the ability to where the hindrances have weakened to some degree, maybe not totally, but to some degree that your mindfulness can be aware of the main predominant objects that are coming into your mind. Like when a painful feeling is arising, to know that, but then in the next moment, maybe you hear a loud sound that takes your attention, then you're aware of the hearing, and then in the next moment, there might be a thought arising, and you're able to kind of note the sequential arising of the various sensory impressions from moment to moment without getting dragged out and lost in thinking about them and following them, seeing how they're impermanent. That is Kanika Samadhi. Moment to moment concentration. Is there any more chat questions, Prashant? That little thing is...
No, Bhante. I don't see it.
Okay. How did I get back on this thing? How do I get back to Zoom? I lost that thing.
Just Bhante.
Oh, I want to
Just close
stop the sharing.
You already stopped the sharing. Bhante.
I did?
Yeah. You already stopped.
How come I want this thing to go away?
Just on the right corner, there is an X button on chat. Just close it.
It won't move in order for me to do it. Oh, come on, help me out, Prashant.
Okay, can you exit the screen on the upper right corner? There is exit full screen. Anything?
Okay, now I'm back to it. Okay, finally. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so if there's no other questions, then we will, as we've done before, for those who want to stay for the guided meditation, we'll take a few minutes break to drink some water or to use the restroom, and then come back for a few exercises, if you like. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video and take a couple minutes break. Okay, friends, we're going to do a few stretches now to hopefully loosen up the body and get the energy moving a little bit in the body so that let me adjust the camera here. Just stand straight, relax the shoulders and relax the arms at the sides. And begin doing some deep, slow breathing, expanding the abdomen, rib cage, and upper chest, drawing the air in, holding the air in for ideally 3 seconds. Then slowly breathing out, feeling the contracting body on the out breath. As before, we coordinate these simple movements with the breathing. On the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, stretch the head back, and stretch upwards all at the same time. Arch your lower spine a bit, and turn the palms down and touch the top of the head on the out breath. In breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back, arch the lower spine, stretch up. Feel the sensations, out breath, touch the top of the head. And once more, in breath. This time hold that upward stretch longer. Feel the sensation. Now release the fingers. On the out breath, lower the arms back to the sides. And relax. Close the eyes, try to feel the increased inner body sensations, pulsation, tingling or prickling sensations. If you can't feel that, just feel where the clothing rubs against the skin, shoulders, chest, arms. Just letting go of your thoughts, just let the thoughts come and go in the background. Keep the feeling of the body in the front of the awareness. Just remember standing, posture awareness. Okay, next on an in-breath, push up on your toes while raising the arms up over the head like in this way, facing the palms together about 6 inches apart and stretch up. On the out breath, come back, the arms back to the sides, the heels back down to the floor. Use the breathing to help lift and lower the body like blowing up a helium balloon. In breath, the body lifts up. Stretch. Out breath. Once more, in. Out. Just relax, just close the eyes. Feel the increased sensations. The sensations are the aggregate of physical form. If those sensations are pleasant or painful, that's the aggregate of feeling. If you identify those feelings as being in your body, that's perception. So you can practice mindfulness even while doing the exercise, developing wisdom. The next we'll do side bending. So on an in-breath, raise both arms up like this, keeping the arms close to your head. On the out breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. Try to keep the arms and hands parallel to each other. In breath, lift up. And out breath, the other side. In breath up. Again to the right, out breath. In. Out. Once more to each side, out breath. To the right. On the out breath, lower both arms. Relax. Or feel that increased pulsation in your hands and fingers. With the arm movements up and down, that extra blood pulsing in the hands and fingers. Might be a pleasant feeling. Sensation itself is the material form. But whether you think it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that's the feeling. Or the thought about it. Just one last exercise, the head turning. On an in-breath, turn your head to the right as far as you comfortably can to look over the right shoulder. Feel that sensation, maybe it's pain. On the out breath, turning 180 degrees back to the left. To look over the left shoulder. In breath to the right. Out breath left. Once more to each side. On the next in-breath, let the head stop in the center. Feel the whole body. In all those different sensations that you're feeling, that's the material form. That's how you have to contemplate it. Oh, that's material form. Feeling of your feet pressing the floor, the earth element, earth vibration, material form. Or the moist saliva in your mouth, the water element, that's material form. But then whether it's a painful or pleasant feeling or neutral feeling, that's the feeling. And you identify it as being a certain body part or thing, that's the perception. And any thoughts about it are the volitional formations. Being able to observe it is the consciousness. So the 5 aggregates right there. It's not rocket science. That's the way you have to investigate until it becomes automatic. And then finally you say, it's the body. Never mind. Just leave it there. It's the body. Only for mindfulness and knowledge. You're not worried about what kind of sensations are going through it. Okay, so let's go ahead and sit back down and let's try that out. Okay, as I've done before, I'm going to be turning off the video so you don't be tempted to want to open your eyes and look at me. And or if you want, you can look at that screenshot on your screen of an erect posture. Just gently close the eyes. Feel the buttocks and feet pressing the floor. That feeling of hardness or solidness of the buttocks and feet pressing the cushion. That's the earth vibration. That's the material form, the physical sensation. You feel your hands and fingers touching. Again, that contact of the hands to the body, also the material form. You feel some pulsation in your fingers. It might be a pleasant feeling. Okay, that's material form producing pleasurable feeling. And relax the shoulders and feel the upper arms hanging from the shoulders. You feel where the clothing touches the skin of the shoulders or chest, upper arms. All those sensations again are just the aggregate of form, material vibration. Does it have a painful, pleasant, or a neutral feeling? If you're hearing these sounds striking your ear also are the material form. If you perceive it as me talking, that's the perception. Whether it produces a painful or pleasant feeling is the feeling. Maybe you don't want me to talk so much so that it produces a painful feeling in you to hear the voice. Or if it helps you to stay focused, you might feel a pleasant feeling. And just try to feel the head balanced on top of the spinal column. Just feel the sensations on your face. Your lips touch together. The nose, or the eyes, and the sockets. Any itches on the head. Just physical form, the aggregate of form, feelings arising with it, perceptions that arise with it. By doing this type of noting and investigation, it helps you to stay concentrated. Because if you don't give the mind any of that kind of extra work, it either goes to sleep or it's lost in other thoughts. So I just mentally try to feel the outline of the body. And then take a few deep, slow breaths, set up some deep, slow breathing to feel that more dynamic, expanding and contracting movement in the middle of the body. And just think along these lines to yourself. Just breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. So now, as we've done before, we want to try to count the breaths from 1 to 10 to develop a more close concentration. Just keep the attention in the center of the body. Stay focused on the movements of the abdomen, rib cage, or chest. Try to do some deeper, slower breathing. If you can follow this kind of slow counting. If you cannot, you can count faster if you need to. On the next expanding in breath, mentally count to 1. Hold the breath 1 or 2 seconds. On the contracting out breath, also count 1. The next expanding in breath, count 2. Pause. Contracting out breath, 2. Next in breath, 3. Hold. Out breath, 3. Next in breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath 7. Out breath 7. In breath 8. Out breath 8. In breath 9. Out breath 9. In breath 10. Out breath 10. Now discontinue the counting, discontinue any controlled deeper breathing. Let the breathing return to its own uncontrolled rhythm, but continue to feel it. Try to keep that outline of the sitting posture in the mind's eye, and just cultivating this mindfulness, breathing in, feeling the whole body, breathing out, feeling the whole body. Just try to feel how the whole body kind of expands with the in-breath, contract with the out-breath. Well, if you want to continue some deeper breathing, if you're not tired of it, you can continue to take some deeper, slower breaths. Feeling the whole body, breathing in, feeling the whole body, breathing out. Or just simply be aware of in, sitting, out, out, sitting. In the brief pauses between the breaths, just feel the outline. Remember that the body is sitting. It's combining the breathing with the posture awareness. When sitting, know that you're sitting. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. You can also apply clear comprehension. What is the purpose of this sitting? Purpose is you're cultivating meditation, cultivating mindfulness and concentration. Is that suitable for you? Is this practice of meditation suitable? Is it suitable for attaining the goal? Are you within the domain of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness? Yes, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of breathing. the clear comprehension of non-delusion. It's just this body sits because of the desire to develop meditation. The body sits and the mind sits. There's no one that owns or controls it. We're just sort of managing it. So just develop that onlooking awareness, that detached onlooking awareness. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. This body exists just for the extent of gaining knowledge, deeper knowledge and mindfulness, but not for flattering or impressing other people, using it to create suffering for oneself or others. Yeah, it's just the body. It's meditating. Great. So as you're meditating, understanding the origination factors in this body. This body came to be because of the mother and father coming together, and the consciousness coming from another life creates a new mind and body in the womb. It's born. 5 aggregates become active. There's contact, feeling, craving, desire, more karmic actions. Dissolution factors in the body, how it stops coming again in the future to attain enlightenment. So while you're feeling the body, all those sensations are the form aggregate, the aggregate of form, sound you're hearing. There's also the form aggregate. But these are producing feelings, pleasant, painful, or neutral feelings. Worldly, pleasant, painful, or neutral feelings connected with the sensory world. Or if you've already reached a level of deep concentration, feeling piti and sukha, it's a pleasant, unworldly, pleasant feeling arising. Or if you're upset because you can't concentrate, that's an unworldly, painful feeling. Just breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Just being alert for various sensations coming and going in the body. Any painful sensations, unpleasant sensations, itchy, scratchy sensations, unpleasant sensations. And there's a comfortable, pleasant sensation. These arise due to conditions. They don't arise out of nowhere. How they arise, how they will continue to arise or cease arising. Cultivating the Chintamaya Panya investigation. the Dhamma Vichaya. If the mind has become calm enough to see how quickly the various sensations arise, developing the anicca sanya, the perception of impermanence. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Different sensations arising and vanishing. Even thoughts, urges coming and going in the mind. Just little by little opening up to the flow of impermanence. If the mind is calm enough. If not, if there's still too many thoughts or restlessness, go back to focusing more exclusively on the breathing, counting the breaths again, to slow the mind down. Do some deep, slow breathing. Help keep the mind in the body. Be aware of the mental state. Is mindfulness there or not? Is desire there or not? Cultivating, if you can, the Kanaka Samadhi moment to moment. Whatever is arising, take the attention in the moment, just aware of that. Oh, this is form, this is feeling, this is perception, volition, a hindrance. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Sensations come and go. Feelings come and go. Perceptions, thoughts come and go. Mental states, hindrances come and go. This is all just a continuous flow and flux of impermanence through this conditioned body and mind. The Kanika Samadhi is ability just to be aware and follow that moment by moment. Hear a feeling, there a sound. Hear another feeling, there a thought. Without clinging on to them. This body and mind exists for the purpose of gaining knowledge and insight. Not for doing unskillful actions to ourself, others, or both, incurring unnecessary suffering. It's the non-delusion. The clear comprehension. Just practice suitable for gaining that. From time to time, check the posture, take a few deep, slow breaths. Reel the mind back into the present moment, reconnected center, the breathing body, natural connection to present moment awareness. When you can do that, everything else falls into place. The Buddha said the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world, of dualistic projection and suffering, is right here within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its feelings, mental states, consciousness. Sambi sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atani bindati dukhi Yesamango visuddhiya Nati janam apanyacha panyanati ajaito Yam hi janancha panyacha Siri nibbana santiki. All conditioned things of the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to purity. And there's no meditation without wisdom, no wisdom without meditation. One who both meditates and is wise is close to peace and freedom. And thus spoke the Buddha. Okay, now friends, we'll spend a couple minutes sending out thought vibrations of metta toward ourselves and all other beings. So again, try to take some deep, slow breaths, and after breathing in, hold the air in the lungs for as long as you comfortably can. Just imagine all that oxygenated blood going out to all the cells and tissues of the body, mind, nervous system. And feel that relaxing contraction on the out breath. And just repeat that several times. Just with the idea that may I be well, happy, and peaceful, free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May I be able to continue to deepen my understanding of the Dhamma and practice of meditation to help free the mind from confusion and suffering. May I be well, mindful, and wise. Still taking a few more deep, slow breaths. Just with each out breath, just imagine those thought vibrations of metta or pure wisdom, pure love, pure energy going outwards across the fields or hills and valleys, through the towns and cities, sending these vibrations of your loved ones back home. And just, with each out breath, just extending these thought vibrations across the whole country, across the ocean, to the whole earth and the world. Just with the idea that may all living beings, whoever they might be free from greed, hatred, fear, and ignorance. Be free from the pain, sorrow, and sufferings of body and mind brought about by their unskillful, unmindful thoughts, speech, and actions. May all beings have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings have the opportunity to hear the teachings of the Dhamma and to learn and practice meditation to help free the minds from confusion and suffering. May all beings be able to live peacefully and harmoniously together, understanding the ultimate interconnectedness and interdependence of all things. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. Just like a mantra reverberating throughout space. Well, peaceful, and wise. Now to in this meditation, I invite you to join in chanting the little short metta chant of Dukkha Pata. If you know it, you can join. Dukkha Pata cha nidukkha Bhaya Pata cha nibbaya Soka Pata cha nisoka Hontu sabbe pipanino Dukkha Pata cha nidukkha Bhaya Pata cha nibbaya Soka Pata cha nisoka Hontu sabbe pipanino Dukkha Pata cha nidukkha Bhaya Pata cha nibbaya Soka Pata cha nisoka Hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way, may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. And thus spoke the Buddha, the awakened. So if you'd like to join in chanting the sadhu 3 times, you can join in that. Sadhu. Sadhu. Sadhu.